Hey guys, welcome back to the channel where today I'm installing a pressure regulator repair kit in my 5HP19 ZF transmission on my 2003 BMW 530i. So I had previously drained the transmission earlier in the day. The drain plug's a 6mm Allen, and I pulled the fill plug out too, and that's an 8mm Allen. And here I'm removing the pan from the transmission. It's held on by 22 T27 Torx screws. I bought this pressure regulator kit on eBay. It's made by Transgo. The part number on the kit is 5HP19-PR. There was still a lot of oil left in the pan. So after I got the pan off, I ran to get some floor dry and cleaned up my oil mess. Now I'm back under here. Next step is to remove the filter. I'm still using my T27 Torx socket. I got a nice long one that I like to use. And you'll see here that the hole on the filter where the bolt goes is slotted and looks like it came off, but you can see I just busted it off here. After getting the filter out of the way, I recommend you take both bolts out and not breaking it, but it's not like you're going to reuse it anyway. The next step is to Transgo has you remove a couple of bolts. They send you some really long 5mm bolts. They have you cut the heads off and taper the ends. So here you can see I use my T27 to remove two of the small bolts and install these long headless bolts, or studs if you will, and that's supposed to hold the top half of the valve body in there while you remove the bottom half, so that you don't have to remove the whole valve body to do this job. The bigger bolts in the valve body are T40 Torx, so I have a long T40 Torx bit as well that I like to use. I guess any Torx bit would work at this point. I didn't know how many of the bolts you needed to remove, if all of them. Turns out you got to take them all out, but I kind of slowly went at it, seeing if I could just remove the big ones and then pull the valve body, but since we're pulling only half the valve body, you'll need to take all of the bolts out of that front half. As you can see, there's a lot of oil up in that valve body, and I ended up letting it drain overnight. I do all my work at night, and it was starting to get late by the time I got the valve body back together, so I figured I'd just let it drain. This will stink up your garage big time. Depending on what fluid you have in there, this is a stinky job. So now I got the valve body on the bench. I looked at it for a little bit because I've never had one of these apart before. This is the new part. It looks totally different from the old part. This is normal. So Transgo has these wiper rings that go on it, almost like big fat piston rings, but I think they're like a Teflon or a plastic or some kind of other material. They say to use assembly lube. I just use some grease, and then they have you put O-rings over it to size it, and then you put it in the freezer, and that sizes the rings on this piston of the pressure regulator, if you will. So that's what you can see me doing here. So next up we'll actually take the valve body apart. Now this cover's got a lot of spring tension behind it, so you can see I kind of went slowly here. I took out the outside bolts and then I just kind of used the inside bolts to slowly work it out. Next, remove the spring and work the old piston out. It's in this center bore here.
Wow. Definitely a different part. Stuff's kind of dirty.
Pulled the old one out of the freezer and slipped right in there. I almost didn't believe how easy it slipped in, so I pulled it back out and put it back in again. Installed the new spring that has the orange paint on it, and then there's a little tab in there, or a little metal spacer that goes inside the spring as well. And then I cleaned up the cover and put it back on. Back under the car now, I just kind of wiped up the valve body a little bit, or the upper half of the valve body, before I installed the piece we had out here. There's a little piece here that you can just pull out of there, but that's what actually shifts the transmission. So you got to make sure you get that lined up. And here I'm also making sure I get the pins in the right holes so that I only have to put this thing up there once and without damaging it. I don't think it can really be put in wrong, but if you mess up that part where the shifter catches there, it won't shift. So gotta make sure to get it in there right and get it in straight. So there's two different size bolt heads and I think 3 different length bolts, and the smaller ones are M5 and the bigger ones are M6, so you can't really get them in the wrong hole, but you got to make sure you get the right lengths in the right spot, especially if you are like me and just throw all your bolts in a magnetic parts tray. So after you get the valve body all torqued to spec, I would install the filter, which you can see me doing here, you got to make sure you get the O-ring gasket on the filter on there properly and get it inserted into the hole properly to prevent any further issues down the road. Alright, so everything's installed now. I'm going to go ahead and prepare my gasket surfaces. The old gasket was a paper gasket. It looked to be all in one piece. It probably would have been fine to reuse, but not really supposed to reuse gaskets. The new gasket I bought, you'll see, is a rubber one, and it really didn't hold its shape at all, so it was kind of a pain to install. I'd rather use a paper gasket, or I guess even a cork one might be easier, but the rubber one seems to work fine. It's just kind of a pain on the install. My drain pan had all these magnets in it. I don't think they're stock. I think somebody installed those, one of the previous car owners, but I put them back in there. It's not a bad idea. They were holding a lot of metal on them. So here I'm just cleaning up and getting the pan ready for install. Back under the car again, we're going to put the pan on, and you can watch me struggle with the rubber gasket here. I apologize for the poor lighting in this part of the film, but you know, I'm working with what I got underneath the car in an oily mess and a bunch of floor dry. But this is fun stuff, right? We're working on bimmers. So get your pan all torqued to spec and get your drain plug tightened up in there. Then you can remove your fill plug, which is an 8mm, and then it takes approximately 3,000 pumps with my cheap hand pump to fill it up with transmission fluid. I use this Valvoline Max Life import stuff that's supposed to be okay for beamers, and pumped it in there. Once the transmission's full to where it runs out the fill hole, you get out and you start the car and get back under there and pump some more in. Once it comes out again, then you run it through all the gears, hold it in each gear for a couple seconds, put it back in park and get under there and top it off until it runs out again. So we got the transmission all filled up. That kind of completes the job. We're going to take the car down off the jack stands, and I use ramps in the rear, so we'll take it off the jack stands, drive it off the ramps, and go for a test drive. I'd like to thank you all for watching. If you made it this far in the video, definitely click the subscribe button and like, share with your friends. I'm going to do more videos on my bimmers as I do more projects, and stay tuned. Thanks. Would you look at this mess?